This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. And welcome into episode number 151 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, for another show here in late February, the last week of February, essentially, because of the short month as usual. And the hockey season getting shorter and shorter into the regular season. We're already starting conference tournaments this upcoming week here in the college hockey world for some teams, and finishing the last week of the regular season for others, including the men's team and the NCHC. So obviously a big weekend to recap down in Omaha for the men's team. And then on the women's side, of course, the closure of the WCHA playoff round up in Duluth as well. Other things that we have to talk about, a very good week for the Minnesota Wild, and suddenly they might be buyers at the trade deadline, according to Bill Guerin, instead of what we anticipated maybe a week ago. So we'll touch on that, of course. And then our extra ice session, we are going to try to predict the pool of 16 for the NCAA men's hockey tournament. And I don't know how well we did, but every year we do this, it seems to get worse and worse compared to what we think it's going to be relative to what it's actually going to be. But we're going to do our best and take a stab at it, as we always like to do. So without further ado, we start with the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup and Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Center SU News and Notes, Noah, and as we approach the NHL trade deadline, which is this upcoming Friday, March 3rd, it looks like the seal is kind of broken a little bit. So we saw a couple of trades last weekend. Of course, the Patrick Kane watch is in full effect. Again, the Rangers making a couple of moves, putting Jake Lecision on waivers and making some other roster moves. They made a trade over to the Vancouver Canucks for a prospect. Again, all the indications that they are making the necessary cap and roster moves to free up the necessary space to acquire Patrick Kane, although, again, Patrick Kane's in control of it. But how about the trades that did take place? And there's also going to be a couple of breaking trades I break down, so bear with me. Nito Niederreiter, former Minnesota Wild winger, going from the Nashville Predators to the Winnipeg Jets for a 2024 7th-round pick. 28 points in 56 games played, so he's had a decent year so far. Yeah. But here's the big one. Boston Bruins acquiring both forward Garnet Hathaway and defenseman Dmitry Orlov from the Washington Capitals in exchange for forward Craig Smith and a 2023 first-round pick. Now, mind you, the Minnesota Wild were also involved as salary retention partners in this. So the Minnesota Wild to get, I believe, a 5th-round pick in this trade in 2023. As they are retaining 25% of Dmitry Orlov's salary. So big one by the Boston Bruins, already a scary team as it is.
It's, the same as I think we forgot to mention, by the way, the trade, of course, with Toronto last time. The Wild only eat about $88,000 in that trade. For actual salary. And that's where people say, well, how can Patrick Kane be traded to the Rangers, for example? Well, that's why, because actual salary remaining on that deal. But who actually this really hurts more than anybody, speaking of St. Cloud, this really hurts a guy like Nick Dowd. When we talked to him, he really liked playing with Garnet Hathaway, and they had a lot of chemistry. Nick Dowd having a really great year and earning some money for the Capitals as well. So we'll have to see how he kind of responds with that. But yeah.
On top of that, it sounds like because of that move, the Capitals have entered the chat for Jacob Chychrun. That's been some things that have been on 32 Thoughts. Again, Elliot Friedman, Jeff Merrick up there at Sportsnet do a fantastic job. And it makes sense, Noah, too, because if you're the Arizona Coyotes, I know that some partners have been out there, the Los Angeles Kings, I think even the Dallas Stars have shown interest. I know typically the big fish, you want to move those pieces out of the conference so they don't come back to bite you. And the last time they could bite you would be a Stanley Cup final run. So that might make more sense.
Yeah.
The question is, does Washington have the process, I guess the necessary tools to give up? They kind of do now with first round pick coming from Boston. Now the question is, do they want to give up one for with a deep draft coming up? And I think with Alex Ovechkin, I think they want to retool on the fly. It makes sense to me for them to go after Chychrun.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, I think the scariest part of this whole thing is the Boston Bruins didn't need to do this. Like, that's
right.
How good they are, and they did it anyway. And it's like,
is this reminiscent of the 2018 or was it 2019 Tampa Bay Lightning? 2019, yeah, where they didn't need to do anything. They really didn't, and then they didn't win a single game in the quarterfinals. So, that would be just a funny repeat of history if that did happen.
Yeah,
I don't think that'll happen. But
the cupboards are already full in Boston, and they decided to go to the store for some more snacks. Basically, I mean,
they're waiting for a nuclear fallout. That's for sure.
Yeah.
To keep the train rolling here, Noah. The Ottawa Senators also making a move, trading defenseman Nikita Zaitsev, the former Maple Leaf, and a second round pick in 2023, a fourth pick in 2026 to Chicago for future considerations. So again, Chicago looking to continue to bolster their cap cupboards here again, as you could say, as they begin to do a deep rebuild over there in Chicago. And the Ottawa Senators, again, just disappointing this year. Again, we thought that would have been much better. Again, they seem to be sellers at the deadline. Another big one that has already coming off is the Golden Knights trading Shea Weber's contract, the Coyotes, for a prospect, Dyson Mayo. They also got I believe a late round pick in that trade as well. The Golden Knights did. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but this is interesting because, mind you, Vegas has been a team that's used LTIR to help them spend more money. And with what that indicates to me, Noah, is that with their captain Mark Stone going down, that tells me with this move that they don't expect him to return. So I don't think you're going to see Mark Stone coming back, and at the earliest it would be before a playoff run, thus allowing him to make this move to Arizona, which will allow them to get at least, a hit to the cap floor a little bit with the salary. So that it's good for Arizona. Now for some breaking trades here before we get to some of the waiver news. The Dallas and Montreal, a trade just today here on Sunday. Both teams. So right now, Montreal trading to Dallas Evgeny Dadonov, and in return they're getting Denis Gurianov, who has been, shall we say, had a bit of a down year. He's got quite a cannon for a one-timer. Dennis Gurianov does, and Dadonov, of course, has been around the league a little bit. Certainly a nice depth piece for Dallas, who's looking to, again, secure some of their bottom six for a deeper run. And I'm trying to find the other trade here.
It was Vegas. That's why I was kind of surprised you didn't stick with him. It's Ivan Barbashev, I believe.
Barbashev, yep. Barbashev to the Golden Knights from the St. Louis Blues. And from what is being reported too, and I think this is interesting, is that they still believe the Vegas Golden Knights are in on Timo Meier still from the San Jose Sharks. So I know that the New Jersey Devils are also in on the Timo Meier sweepstakes, as we can see. And it sounds like there's an expectation that that Timo Meier deal may come down as soon as today. So some of those breaking trades here this morning. So we appreciate everybody working with us here as these things just kind of come out of the blue. And we're starting to see, it looks like the trade floodgates open up here a little bit here on this Sunday. Again, less than a week before the deadline here, Friday at 3:00 Eastern. Yeah,
we'll know obviously by the show next week, of course, everything and how it gets hashed out. And I always kind of like that when, we're not right up against the deadline, when we have a chance to really break it down. So obviously we'll take a look.
I disagree. I used to love, so for those who ever watched TSN Trade Center, they used to carry it in the US. They had two desks. They had the desk in front that was James Duthie, I think a couple of other panelists, and then behind them was a second, and it was Bob McKenzie, Pierre LeBrun, and a couple of others, and they're just sitting there on their Blackberries. And in the middle of a conversation from the front panel, all of a sudden LeBron would go like, "Oh, Sagan, from Boston to Dallas, and they would just be like still typing away.
Yeah,
it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree for live TV. I mean, for our show is what I'm saying. So we don't miss anything, is what I mean.
Our show though, no, come on.
Yeah, well, somebody, I'm sure. Other than that, two waiver things. St. Louis also claiming Kasperi Kapanen off of waivers from Pittsburgh, and the Canadiens claiming Chris Tierney off waivers from the Panthers as well.
Also scored in his debut with the Montreal Canadiens too. Yeah, Chris Tierney.
Yeah, so let's stick with Florida here. Our second to last topic here, just a quick one. Spencer Knight, a little bit surprising here, unfortunately, entering the player assistance program. He announced that 2 days ago, so wishing him the best of luck. And then
interesting on that note too. No, I don't want to cut you off, but he was actually being sent to the minors when the story came up. So they actually were going to put him down I believe a conditioning stint, and then he ended up voluntarily, from what I understand, going to the player assistance program. So that move was indeed canceled. So just interesting timing. You kind of wonder if that was a wake up call to him a little bit. Obviously we don't know the details, but again, Spencer Knight into the player assistance program, as you mentioned.
Yeah, wishing him the best of luck. And then a couple of injuries here. The Jets, Cole Perfetti out at least 8 weeks with an upper body injury. That certainly hurts. A little bit of a reason for Nino Niederreiter as well. Nashville Predators, Johansson, he's out 12 weeks after being cut by a skate and having surgery on his right leg. So Ryan Johansson
for Nino Niederreiter too.
Yeah, so that's tough. For the Leafs, will Jake Muzzin ever play hockey again? I say
spine.
I say that lightly. He's 34, cervical spine injury.
And then he's been injured quite a bit the last 2 years. And with this, and Noah, obviously you can speak to this more than I can, but cervical spine injury doesn't sound something that even when you recover, doesn't sound like you're, shall we say, maybe supposed to do a contact sport.
Yeah, it's a hard place to one, work on. Obviously, two, it's a dangerous place to work on, obviously, because you're so close to the brainstem and that sort of thing. But you really wonder about that, and that's where we get into this conversation. What matters more to you, playing hockey or your long-term health? Of course, Stanley Cup champion with the LA Kings as well too. So we'll have to see. And then in New York, Matthew Barzal, week to week due to injury. He's expected back this season, but we'll have to see. And welcome in to the main portion of the show, the Huskies Warming House podcast, episode 151. Nick Maxon with myself, Noah Grant, here on this Sunday. We will record, I believe, Monday night next week. So expect a Tuesday morning release, and then we should get back to relative normal, at least. We'll see, depending on what scheduling is, at least hopefully for some of the upcoming NCHC playoff stuff. So we'll have to see for that as well. And we might have some pretty good coverage of that coming up as well too, Nick. But yeah, other than that here, hockey, we are essentially halfway through the regular season for a lot of these conferences. Really, it's only Hockey East, the NCHC, and our independents, which can't wait to talk about them, to be totally honest with you. There's one team that really is providing some intrigue here as we approach tournament time. But yeah, let's start in the Big Ten. Why don't we here? Lots to talk about. Wisconsin, Penn State. It was a 6-1 victory the first night for Penn State. No surprise there, but Wisconsin eking out the 2-1 victory yesterday against the Nittany Lions. That kind of stings a little bit if you're Penn State. Notre Dame and Michigan doing battle. It was actually Notre Dame twice, first in a shootout 4-3, and then yesterday's game was exceptional, 2-1 in overtime. The Fighting Irish get the victory. Very good series, setting up a very good matchup here and really kind of turning the tables a little bit. You look at the Big Ten standings, Michigan State, who was off, actually dropped to like 6th, 7th, around there, and the point disparities between all of the teams besides Wisconsin and Minnesota are like 2 or 3 points between 2 through 7. So it's been crazy. And then Ohio State getting swept by Minnesota pretty handily. 9-2 was the final over the weekend in terms of scoring for the Gophers compared to the Buckeyes. So not exactly
not ideal
builder.
Yeah. And for Michigan State too, they've dropped to 19th in the pairwise, and they've been kind of hanging around that 15-16 mark. And with some of the results of this last weekend, that puts them in a pretty precarious position. They're going to have to make a run at the Big Ten tournament title to probably get a bid into the NCAA tournament now that we're at where we are in the calendar. So you talk about worst case scenario for the Spartans that sort of came down on them this weekend.
Yeah, so we'll talk and preview a little bit about that in just a few moments here. We'll try to maybe predict some of those bigger ones. I think for sure we'll probably take a look at the Big Ten and CCHA as far as those tournaments are concerned. Northern Michigan, a bit of a disruptor this weekend, 4-2 victories each night against Bowling Green. That's a tough one.
Is it a disruptor though?
Yeah, in terms of them trying to catch Michigan Tech, maybe. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I don't know if I look at it that way. What I look at is Northern Michigan, where the hell did they come out of the closet the last couple of weeks? And I say that respectfully because we sort of have been disappointed with the Wildcats this season. It was supposed to be this, sort of resurgence year for them. And we have all been said that this team is just not what we expected. And all of a sudden with the end of the season on the horizon, they decided to turn on the gas pedal and then turn on the auxiliary rocket power too. This is an impressive weekend for the Wildcats. And right now, one of the hotter teams going into the CCHA tournament, which starts this next weekend.
I look at it in a different light. I look at it as they started the season really well and had a good first half and then struggled. They kind of fell off the table, and now they've maybe started to come back to what we expected in the first half kind of thing. So maybe they were gone but not forgotten kind of thing in the second half, and now maybe they're kind of returning to form. But nonetheless, all of these conference tournaments, I would say, really besides the ECAC, which in historical years has provided a lot of intrigue out of the blue, so don't even count them out. Every conference tournament this year has a chance for a team that is not an auto bid an at-large bid to be an auto bid team winning their conference tournament. So there's a lot of intrigue on the line here. I think the CCHA is definitely one of those conference tournaments as well. Lake Superior State sweeping Ferris State 3-2 in overtime and 4-2. So a couple of good victories
big
for the Lakers. I mean, it doesn't really change who they're going to get in their first round matchup in their conference tournament, but a little bit of confidence builder moving into that. Michigan Tech, Mankato splitting, Tech 2-0, Mankato 3-2 last night. And then Bemidji State, St. Thomas. It was the Tommies actually in night number one, disrupting slightly, 3-1 victory for them. And then they got trounced pretty badly yesterday. 7-2 was the final score for Bemidji. That one was in St. Thomas. ECAC action here. Cornell winning their games, Quinnipiac, Harvard, all winning both their Friday and Saturday games. Although Harvard's Saturday victory was 3-2 over Clarkson, but nobody was upset last weekend, so nothing really notable to talk about for the ECAC. Hockey East here, BU beating Vermont on Friday, and Saturday, I believe, was 2-0 or 3-0 was the final score. So the Terriers a sweep there. Northeastern splitting with UMass as well. So Northeastern kind of on the outside looking in right now. Same with Merrimack. They swept UMass Lowell, but they kind of did some damage to themselves in the second half of the season, and they're pretty much going to have to win the Hockey East tournament to have a chance here. UNH losing to UConn 6-1. There's another team that, I mean, I thought Hockey East, you looked maybe a month or two ago, we thought they were going to maybe pull 3 or 4 teams out of that conference the way that some of them had rolling, and then everybody kind of came back down to earth and beat up on each other. So yeah, it has not been ideal for Hockey East if you're a fan over there. That's what you get for scheduling weird schedules.
Yep.
That's all. That's all I'm going to put out there. RIT continues to roll in Atlantic hockey. They swept Air Force, and AIC sweeping Sacred Heart. It was a shootout victory in night number one, and then a 5-0 victory in the second night. Sacred Heart having a good season as well. There's a tournament that, even though RIT is kind of the big dog there, which it used to be AIC, so good to see somebody else have a great season. Anybody could take the cake in Atlantic hockey right now. RIT is the closest in terms of pairwise at 22. So whoever wins that conference is the only one that's going to be in. Safe to say. Independent wise here, Anchorage traveled to UConn on Thursday. They lost 4-3 in overtime, and they traveled to Long Island Saturday and won 4-0. So good to see the Seawolves kind of end on a high note there for that weekend. Then Alaska sweeping Arizona State 4-2 both nights, and Lindenwood losing to the under-18 team 6-1. So this Nanooks team here, when we talk a little bit in our extra ice session, they're at 12 right now in the pairwise, and they've got Lindenwood coming up this weekend. So they have only made the NCAA tournament one time, has Alaska Fairbanks, and that was back in 2010. So they lost to Boston College 3-1 in the first round that year. So would love to see an independent team punch their ticket to a tournament again. So they have Lindenwood to close out the regular season, I believe, this weekend. Anchorage will host Arizona State. As far as the independents, the only other regular season action besides the NCHC going on here, Nick, what's on tap? Providence travels to BU, Northeastern at UMass Lowell, UConn a home and home against BC, and Vermont a Saturday matchup against Merrimack. So that is it besides the NCHC for the regular season. So let's take a look at some of these tournaments here. The ECAC tournament will be underway, and the Atlantic hockey tournaments will be underway. Both of those, I would imagine Quinnipiac or Harvard are the front runners for the ECAC, but anybody could realistically come out of that. So we could be in for a surprise there. Atlantic hockey, of course, will provide our auto bid. The question is where.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's start with the CCHA, and then we'll go to the Big Ten here. CCHA, number 8, Lake Superior State takes on number 1, Mankato. Let's start with that matchup. Who do you have?
I mean, come on. Really?
Lake Superior State, obviously.
Of course.
Mankato is likely to win that hockey matchup there, but you never know. Number 7, St. Thomas has number 2, Michigan Tech. I think I know who you're picking in this. My question to you is, is this something that pushes, beyond our expectation and is a lot tighter than we expect, or?
Michigan Tech has historically owned this matchup, so I think it's Michigan Tech in 2 games.
Yeah. I just wanted to take a look at the tournament bracket here just to make sure that, 3 weekends is what, yes, Friday through Sunday. I just want to make sure. I totally believe you, but I want to make sure that I had the tournament format right because
best of 3 in the first.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to keep it straight. And then Ferris State, number 6, gets number 3, Bowling Green.
This is interesting. Yeah,
I see Bowling Green sweeping just because Ferris State has kind of struggled as of recent.
Same with Northern Michigan. I think they knock out Bemidji State.
Really? Okay.
I do. I think Bemidji State has had a colossal collapse the second half of the season, and Northern Michigan's playing some of their best hockey. Bemidji State took out some anger in the St. Thomas Tommies yesterday with that 7-2 win, but I still think Northern Michigan's the better squad here. Bemidji State just has trouble scoring too much, despite the 7 on the board. St. Thomas, had their one on and one off kind of weekend that we've seen over the course of the second half of the season. So I don't put too much stock into it. I think it's the Wildcats that take care of business against the Beavers. That one could push 3 games though. Yeah, I have Bemidji State in 3 in that one. Actually, I have not been enamored with Northern Michigan in the second half, and I don't think I think Bemidji State has been a consistent force for whatever reason. I mean, it's not like they've wavered up and down, I think, like Northern Michigan has. I think Northern Michigan provides the X factor. Depending on what you get from them from the weekend is going to determine a lot, but Bemidji State hasn't been enamoring in their play, but they've been consistent in what they brought to the table over each weekend. So I think that you know what to expect from Bemidji, and it's really on Northern Michigan to simply be better. I think Bemidji historically at tournament time has really kind of, been able to turn up the heat. I think it's going to be Bemidji as the 5 seed with the little mini upset right there. Actually, Northern Michigan swooped in and stole the 4 seed there from Bemidji State with their victories this weekend. And the Tommies, of course, their victory against the Beavers as well. So CCHA tourney, lots to play for there. Big Ten tournament, of course, Minnesota has the bye in the first round this upcoming weekend. So it'll be number 7, Wisconsin, number 2, Michigan. I think this one could go to 3 games. Seriously, I know a lot of people would disagree, but the Badgers have played mini spoiler a little bit over the past couple weekends. I think Michigan's way too strong, but I think you're out of your mind. Honestly,
well, I mean, we already knew that. Like I said, I think Michigan definitely wins, but I wouldn't be shocked.
No way. I think I get what you're saying, but I just don't think Michigan is going to allow the Badgers to get any sort of traction in this. I know Michigan has its own expectations for themselves. I don't expect them to give Wisconsin any bit of room to give themselves any confidence in the series. I think Michigan will put the hammer down not only the Wisconsin season, but potentially a career of Coach Tony Granato.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Ohio State, number 3, hosting number 6, Penn State here. This matchup has pairwise implications here, just specifically for the Nittany Lions, but also really for Ohio State. They're right next to each other in the pairwise here. This is where it starts to get a little bit difficult. Who do you have in this one?
For Penn State and Ohio State?
Yeah.
I have Ohio State on this one. Penn State can score. There's no question about it. but so can the Buckeyes. But I think the big thing for me is Penn State's defense can be quite leaky at times. The thing is, if Penn State gets out to an early start, that's when they have a lot of success, but that hasn't happened in the second half as much as they were having that in the first. So I think the Buckeyes take this one in 2 games over Penn State, just because I think, again, Ohio State's the more balanced team up from front to back.
Yeah, again, I think this one has 3 written all over it. Just because Penn State and Ohio State, they've both been so up and down in the second half of the season. I agree with you. I think the Buckeyes get the job done, but I think this one has a chance for 3 games. I don't know if all 3 will be particularly close, but I think one of them at least goes to overtime, and should provide a lot of intrigue there. And then Michigan State in the number 5 spot, Notre Dame in the number 4 spot here.
Oh boy.
As of recent, I suppose Notre Dame probably has the edge here, although the Spartans, I mean, you can never really count them out. I'm actually going to go the opposite direction here and confuse people even more. I'm going to go Notre Dame in 2 games. I just think the Fighting Irish, coming off of last weekend especially, are primed and ready to have a good look. I know I've been high on the Spartans all season, but I think Notre Dame takes it in 2.
I'm actually with you. I think, with that performance against Michigan, Notre Dame, again, they thrive on good defensive structure. Again, having, is it Ryder Rolston that's been out? A lot of their offensive punch went with it, but they've been able to adjust. They've been able to get the job done. They were stingy-minded. They beat North Dakota in the regionals last year. So they have that ability. And I think, again, the only X factor here, Noah, is Michigan State. Now that, they're outside the top 16, do they come in with some desperation? Now, mind you, desperation can work both ways. It can work you to give you that extra bit of boost, because your season's on the line, or does it overtake you and does it, make you play out of your structure and kind of get you running around a little bit? I'm with you. I think Notre Dame takes this series in 2 just because of the way that they're playing. Michigan State, when they've had their struggles, they also don't have the ability to score, but also defense has been an issue with them all most of the season. So I'm with you with the Fighting Irish taking care of business against the Spartans.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look. Obviously, we'll have the answers next week, of course. So that is really it for what we're looking forward to. I like tournament time because things get very simple and very easy to follow. When it comes to standings wise, by the way, like we said, Atlantic Hockey, they're underway. Of course, RIT is going to have their matchup. I believe they have Mercyhurst is who they start with.
Right. Yeah.
Although I don't know if the first 2 seeds get a bye. I'm going to guess not. The thing that really hurts, by the way, when we go back to Michigan State, the thing that hurts them is what a tough weekend to be off. Is the weekend right before that tournament. So, keep an eye on that one. But RIT is the team to beat in Atlantic Hockey this season. AIC, Sacred Heart, and Canisius rounding out the top 4 right on their heels in that tournament as well. ECAC is also underway. Quinnipiac is the clear frontrunner in the ECAC, but Harvard still has an at-large bid, so it's really Cornell trying to cement their place. For one, I would say Cornell would like to get out of their first, round matchup, obviously, to make sure that they stay in the tournament conversation. And St. Lawrence is really the first team on the outside looking in. So a lot to be played for here as, of course, we take a look. We'll obviously dive into the pairwise. We'll save that for the extra ice session just because of the fact that it ties in much, much better to everything that's been going on. Although I suppose we could mention, we'll wait till we get through the NCHC stuff. So let's flip over to the NCHC right now. NCHC action here. There was an upset this weekend, and Huskies fans certainly are rejoicing ever so slightly, I would think. But let's start with Denver, Western Michigan here. Denver, a sweep, 5-2 and 3-1. This one
needed that one.
Kind of surprised me a little bit, but as a Huskies fan, like you said, is exactly what you needed to kind of stay in the hunt at least a little bit here. But I figured Western Michigan might at least get a point out of this weekend.
They probably could have had there not been a phantom major penalty on Friday with also the replay system down. And even then, I'm not sure how you make that call like they did. Terrible call against Western Michigan. And I know that there was a lot of talk on social media about it. Still don't know how, after even with the discussions, how that was a major penalty to, I don't know how I see that. That would be, it's one of those situations where Mike Schmitty would be a great resource in terms of, what was seen on the ice in that scenario. I just don't know how, with any of the angles that, they were showing with that, how that constituted a major penalty. Penalty to begin with. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, but if you're a Huskies fan, you'll take the Western Michigan losses. Of course, that sets up a very interesting last week of the regular season.
Does.
North Dakota, Colorado College here, the Fighting Hawks getting two crucial victories and a couple of points here, 2-1 in overtime the first night, 1-0 in a shootout yesterday at Robeson Arena, packed as always, or not as well, I guess as always, I guess since the inception really. So
Yeah.
that looks really good. NCC, this Tigers team, don't count them out when we move into the following weekend after this one for sure. I mean,
You can hold North Dakota to 3 goals on the weekend. That's still impressive. It just stinks that they only got one themselves. That's really the only downfall.
Yeah, so a little bit reminiscent of the scoring touch of previous years for the Tigers, but we'll have to see how that carries into their last week of the regular season. Miami traveling up to Duluth, a couple of later starts, especially on Saturday. Certainly didn't hurt one team. Friday night it was Duluth 3-2, and Saturday the Miami Redhawks 4-1 victory against the Dogs. If you're a Huskies fan, you gotta love that one. And I think it makes you feel a little bit better. Yeah, I believe because of pairwise implications in some senses. I know that Duluth still wins the pairwise battle, but that victory means that Miami has beaten St. Cloud, who has been beaten by Duluth. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt you in that regard. So, or maybe it does. Maybe it does. I mean, Duluth still has won.
Give Duluth again that desperation team coming into the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center last regular season weekend, because that's a tough loss for the Bulldogs, who were, shall I say, just not a good game for them at all yesterday.
Yeah, well, regardless for Duluth, I mean, even if they win both their games, they're still going to have to win the tournament. I mean, there's no real scenario in which they're going to get in otherwise, I don't think.
Here's the problem. We've seen that before. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Last year they did it. So,
and right now, St. Cloud would actually have Duluth in the first round. Same matchup, rinse and repeat, actually.
Yep.
So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Before we get to that, though, St. Cloud and Omaha, a pair of 6-2 scores. It was St. Cloud Friday night, Omaha on Saturday night here. First one, the Huskies victory, attendance just over 7,000 down in Omaha. And we can actually say down because it is actually, south of, I feel like as Midwesterners, we like to use that phrase a little bit too willingly. But nonetheless, Grant Cruikshank getting back on the board for the first time in a while. Good to see him on the board of the power play just 5.5 minutes into that hockey game. Grant Deshawn, his second of the season. Vietti Miettinen, Adam Ingram on the power play. Special teams rolling again. Cruikshank, his second on the power play in the third period as well. So St. Cloud 3 for 5 on the man advantage, and then perfect 5 for 5 on the kill in the first night. So really everything you could have asked for if you were a Huskies fan in the first night. Shots 28-25 in favor of St. Cloud, and they were 56% in the faceoff dot at cool 36 for 64. Jackson Castor with a 920 on the night, 23 of 25. And Simon, I always butcher this name. I think it's Lukotsky, but I always butcher it. 15 of 20 for a 750. He was pulled for Jake Hercharski, and he stopped 7 of 8 for an 875. So St. Cloud on the first night, I mean, you look at that score and you thought, maybe they've finally, woken up. Maybe they're, kind of back in business a little bit. Maybe the team that we had expected them to be. Attendance just under 8,000 in night number 2. And I guess the extra 800 people in the building certainly bolstered this Maverick team to a victory. It was, essentially 5-2 after the second period, and then an empty netter from Tyler Weiss to cap off this hockey game. Huskies were 50% in the faceoff dot, but outshot by 11, 41-30. Jackson Castor still at a 909. I mean, he did everything he could to try to keep this hockey team in this game.
Starting that game too, 7 shots was pulled. Not sure if it was more on him than it was maybe the team in front of him kind of thing, it's certainly not, not great if you're needing to pull the goaltender in that situation. So
St. Cloud was down obviously 2-0 before the 9-minute mark of the first period, and then both teams going 1 for 4 on the man advantage. So if you're St. Cloud, I mean, you went 8 for 9 on the kill over the weekend. Not exactly terrible by any means, especially from what we've talked about. And then essentially you ended up going, what would it have been? It would have been 4 for 9 on the man advantage this weekend. So,
and mind you, St. Cloud also finishing the game with 5 defensemen, both Jack Peard and Andre Treyball leaving Saturday's game with injuries, so that could be significant news as we head into this weekend, depending on their availability. So yikes. Injury bug continues to strike at the worst times, as it always does.
Yeah, like you mentioned, obviously you kind of wonder what Brett Larson's plan is too. It's not, if both of those guys aren't ready, it's you, or even if they're at about 80%, sometimes you wonder, do you want the rest and really know what's important here, knowing this team is going to make the tournament? Obviously there's a lot more to play for if you're St. Cloud, beyond next weekend. So we'll have to take a look. Of course, St. Cloud will, of course, be hosting Duluth, getting ready for this matchup. North Dakota, I believe, will be traveling to Omaha. Is that correct? Or are they hosting Omaha?
They are hosting Omaha. And then, of course, it's the Gold Pan to
home and home
with Denver NCC. And then it's Western Michigan traveling to Miami for. So we talk about St. Cloud trying to get help to try to maybe get up into because they're only back 2 points, right? They're only back 2 points from.
They're back 2 of Omaha, and they're losing the tiebreaker right now to Western Michigan. Yeah.
So if anything, they may get some help from Omaha, or from North Dakota. Sorry, but that's a stretch. Let's just say Omaha has had. What do you call it? They've had some success against North Dakota in North Dakota as of recent. So we'll see. Again, all the home ice is locked up for the NCHC. The top 4 teams now, just a matter of seeding Denver, securing the number 1 spot. That's the only top 4 place that it won't move, but there still could be some movement here in the bottom 3 of the top 4. So we'll see. I mean, St. Cloud just has to take care of business against Minnesota Duluth just to begin with, and then if they can get some help. Again, those matchups aren't very favorable to St. Cloud to get some external help, but either way, you'll have home ice. Now the question is, who do you face in the first round?
Yeah, really what you need is Miami to push either Western Michigan to an overtime game in any capacity, or win one of those hockey games to give St. Cloud a chance, because of course they are losing that tiebreaker right now. Even with a sweep, I imagine Western Michigan is going to have a pretty good look. But that's the thing, is I think if you're St. Cloud, you almost depending on how things shake out with Denver and Colorado College, I think almost third is almost a better spot for St. Cloud, in the sense that they would likely get North Dakota. Colorado College has kind of provided St. Cloud with some fits, especially in St. Cloud. So I think Omaha might not be caught if you're St. Cloud, but we'll have to see what happens with that matchup as well too. But yeah, everything to play for. I mean, this weekend, really, let's go back though for St. Cloud and their effort over the past weekend. Some hopeful signs on Friday, not so much on Saturday. How do you really qualify this weekend?
Well, I think there was probably some frustration. Again, Brett Larson, I think one thing we forgot to mention too, he's 100th victory again on Friday. So fastest coach in St. Cloud history to get to 100 wins. So you kind of wonder if there was some emotions released there. So to me, it's an emotional roller coaster for St. Cloud right now. And I don't know when Jack Peard and Andre Treyball left Saturday's game, but you kind of wonder if it was early on, does that hamper maybe, or maybe does that, shall we say, skew maybe Saturday's result a little bit? And if they're not ready to go, does that mean you're going to both be playing Mason Rainers and Cooper Wiley, who's been in and out of the lineup? A couple of other key notables too to the forward group. We haven't seen Ryan Rosborough the last couple of weeks kind of fallen out of favor, and we haven't even seen Joey Molinar too. It's been Grant Ashawn. It's been who am I missing? Jack Rogers, who's looked pretty good. And we also haven't seen Ethan Aucoin either. So you kind of see some consistency there along the forward group, which is a good sign. And we talked about some of those lineup changes and Brett Larson trying to figure things out. But now he's got a bigger mess again. Noah Dillon Anhorn, and now potentially some folks being out of the lineup, including Peart and Treyball. So he's got some work to do to try to figure out that defensive pairing lineup. Oh boy, just... Yeah. And you talked about timing too, right? No, not that there's ever great timing, but this is definitely not ideal if you're Brett Larson and the Huskies.
Yeah, injury bug has bitten them before. Just go back to last season in the net mining position. Of course, a couple of key losses to Miami and CC this year. Miami at 43, CC at 38 as far as the pairwise is concerned. Minnesota Duluth is at 25, so you can pallet that ever so slightly, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's not exactly ideal.
Right.
It's been a weird second half.
Has been.
I know that we talked about too, this St. Cloud team, oh, they're different than last year, that sort of thing. Kind of an unfortunate storm of events, so to speak. I think somewhat self-inflicted and then somewhat injury inflicted too, that unfortunately kind of kept the ball rolling downhill a little bit here. St. Cloud has one more week to kind of really tune things up. And if you want to be really theoretical, at least 2 more weekends to prepare for the NCAA tournament, if hopefully not 3, depending on what they bring to the table. Still a lot, of time, one, for guys to get healthy. I mean, that's, 3 weeks is a long time for guys to, recuperate if they have to recuperate, obviously. But beyond that, also a small chance to really kind of make some tweaks and make some adjustments here. I think one of the things too, like you mentioned, I mean, the early pull of Bassie on Saturday as well too. Jackson Castor looked all right this weekend. I thought otherwise. Goaltending still giving this team a chance for most nights if you're in a St. Cloud uniform. But, one of the things that I know on Friday night, the Huskies obviously had some really good production, really quiet weekend. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Yami Crandall had 1 point, as did Zach Okabe. I believe he only had 1 throughout the weekend as well, too. So kind of the 2 top guys, a little bit quiet. Couple points, multi-point weekend for Vieti Mietin and Grant Cruikshank, though. Good to see Cruikshank with 3 goals.
Ingram at 5 point out on Friday. That's the one thing with Ingram, too, a freshman, again, the second-round pick. When he's on. It's just, again, his consistency just hasn't been there. Again, he's a freshman, so can't really put too much on his shoulders right now, but it does show you Okabe and Crandall were both a little bit quiet this weekend. Now, granted, Cruikshank kind of, coming out of the closet a bit, but now can get everybody to be on the same page together, right? It's definitely starting to show that if not everybody's having the same weekend, that this team is vulnerable, unfortunately, especially in the upfront department. And again, defense now becoming the big question mark as we head down the stretch as far as what we might see. So still some question marks, but overall, like you said, and as we mentioned last week too, time is running short. They don't have a lot of time to figure this out. So hopefully they can do. Of course, we know coaching staff is doing whatever they can, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, all goals coming on the power play for Grant Cruikshank this weekend as well, too. I mean, a split against a pretty good Omaha team this year. Not terrible. I think it's just more the fashion. I think, you're riding high on Friday with the score that you have, and then to give up, the 6-2 score on the other side on Saturday, I think just kind of bites heading back into the last week. But I mean, last weekend of the regular season, it is at home at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center. And the first round the following weekend, for sure, will be at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center. So pack that building. Obviously, crowd noise, fan engagement can make a difference in hockey games like that. That home ice advantage is obviously going to be very pivotal. Lack of home ice advantage, the WCHA playoffs started last week. The women, of course, traveling, up to Duluth. Before we get to that, it was Ohio State and Wisconsin finishing out the regular season last Sunday. Ohio State a 3-1 victory to flip-flop some positions there. So it was Bemidji facing Ohio State in the first round of the playoffs. Every round of the WCHA first round on the women's side was decided in 2 games this weekend. 4-1 and 2-1 were the victories for the Buckeyes, who advanced. Minnesota advancing against St. Thomas 7-0 and 6-2. Those 2 were not particularly close. Mankato traveling to Wisconsin, it was 3-0 and 4-1. Mankato losing both of those hockey games to the Badgers. And St. Cloud, a 1-0 Friday nail-biter loss. And then 5-1, of course, yesterday. Attendance was just under 800 on Friday up in Duluth. Maggie Flaherty, her 9th of the season, actually a power play goal and assist from the netminder, Emma Soderberg, in the middle of period. No, actually, the late stages of period number 3.
Yikes.
Yeah.
The tough one.
That was it in that hockey game. Face-off percentage, a paltry 19 for 45, just over 42%. Shots 33-23 in favor of the Bulldogs. I mean, JoJo Choback had a 970, 32 of 33. I mean, what more can you ask from your goaltender there? Emma Soderberg, one better, 23 of 23 for a perfect 1.0. St. Cloud 0 for 3 on the power play. And of course, Duluth, their lone goal, 1 for 2 on the power play as well. Yeah, that one stung. I mean, you got to score to win a hockey game. I mean, quite obviously, but yeah, I mean, this Huskies team, especially from what we first saw when they first matched up against Duluth, their adjustments in the second half of the season gave them a chance on Friday night. And I think that's what you're looking for is, they at least had a look in that first night to take that hockey game. Unfortunate bounce with about 3.5 minutes left there. Not exactly ideal. Then the second night, the Huskies were somewhat out of it by the time the third period rolled around. 48-24 were the shots against for the Bulldogs, 44% in the draw for the Huskies. And then you look at Sania Hola, who stopped 24 of 26 for a 9.23, and Jojo Chobak stopping 19 of 21 for a 9.05. Emma Soderberg had a 9.58, stopping all but one of the 24 shots that she faced. And what does that mean? Duluth, as the 4 seed, will face Ohio State in the 1 spot. Wisconsin in the 3 spot will face Minnesota in the 2 spot down in Minneapolis to kind of close out the WCHA playoffs. And of course, the championship game to follow those 2 matchups. So as far as I look, the women's team dropped down to 13 in the pairwise on the women's side. So I believe that means they are done for the year unless I'm missing something. So, well, let's talk about this women's team here, Nick. They essentially, with their 2 victories, tied or either surpassed one of the best seasons in franchise history. I mean, a lot of really great things to come out of this women's program and this team this season. Unfortunate result, I think, especially that Friday night loss up in Duluth. I think, you felt like you could have at least pushed it to 3 games if you were going to lose this series. That was one that you would like to have back, I think. But, I mean, what is it about this team relative to the teams of years past that you saw that, was this team truly different from years past, or are we hyping them up too much? I mean, what did you see?
No, not at all. This team needed a push. It needed a kick. And that's where Brian Idalski and his staff with Mir, is it Gel Luso? I have it written down somewhere, but it's a very unique pronunciation. So I apologize to Mira if I butcher that. And as well, of course, Janelle Sergey. I think what has to be mentioned is this coaching staff came in and, from folks that I've talked to, and that is, they asked the players, hey, we know where we're at. How we want to change this. And essentially the coach staff pointed the fingers back at the players. He goes, it's on you and we're going to hold you accountable. And it was a shock to the system. But look at the results, right? I'm curious as to what happened to Bailey Burden. I didn't see her on the roster. She was a first half player. She was a transfer in from, I believe, New Hampshire, and didn't see her on the roster for the second half. I was trying to find something on that. I've been trying to figure it out, but either way, what a season. Honestly, this team looked better. It looked structurally better. There was more options. They looked like they were playing with more confidence. They were pushing back offensively. They just lacked the finish, right? Defensively, one of the better PKs in the WCHA. Their power play was executing. They're moving the puck very well. It is a vast improvement. And Noah, from covering a couple of games with them again on Hockey Day, this team is night and day from just a year ago. Now, the problem is there going to be night and day again next year because there's going to be a lot of talent that they could be losing. We'll start with Himmelrova as well as Unita Newland. So there's going to be some of the folks that carry their offense not be a part of the squad. So where does Brian Idalski and the coaching staff have as far as recruits coming in? So that might hurt a little bit next year, but we don't know. And again, they also have for Laura Zimmerman, who they redshirted, again, part of Team Switzerland. That was a decision from the coaching staff. They wanted 4 years of Laura Zimmerman and figured that, with a transitional year, that they wanted to kind of get through this. So that'll be an instant addition to the offense. Again, they're enamored with Taylor Lind. They're enamored with Emma Gentry. So it's tough, but those are decisions and things you can't control. But this year, I mean, hats off to the coaching staff, hats off to the girls on a successful campaign. Again, this is sort of the season we were hoping to see. We saw the talent that was available, just needed to have it unlocked and just play a little bit better. And they did that. I don't know what more you can ask out of the squad. And so you have to put your hats off. I know that the end kind of stings a little bit. And as you mentioned, maybe not quite in the NCAA tournament field, but I think that would have been a bit of a stretch for an expectation. But I think with the record, the way they played, hell of a season. And congratulations to the women's team, everybody involved. I think it was a hell of a turnaround.
Yeah, it was a great turnaround. Like you mentioned, McKenna Westlow, Yenia Newland, and Tatum Geyer, two captains, Geyer and Newland. And of course, McKenna Westlow, no stranger to being a vocal leader as well, too.
No.
2 fifth years and a graduate student. They are officially done as far as their eligibility. I believe Allie Cornelius is a redshirt senior, and then Olivia Savar, Courtney Hall, Taylor Lynn, Clara Himlerova, and Addie Scribner. I believe there
could be a COVID option.
Yeah, I believe.
Yeah.
So it would not shock me, of course, Clara Himlerova, even Taylor Lind. I potential professional hockey for a couple of these players for sure in their future. I mean, some really good talent to come out of this program, obviously. And then you look to that junior group, which is very hefty, including both goaltenders as well, moving into their senior season next season. Obviously, the goaltending position, no worse for wear, at least moving into next year. Certainly a good tandem in net there. But like you mentioned, this women's team, I'm very curious to see now in his second season, Brian Idalski. I'm curious to see what the plan is moving forward, the incoming recruitment class. Obviously, Janelle Sergey has had a really big hand in those recruiting classes. Like I said, you go into her office and that recruiting board, you look years, it's years out in terms of some of the players that they kind of just have an eye on. So you wonder how that recruiting class is going to mix with Brian Idalski's, hockey ideology that we talked about that was so successful and so potent over this year. Now, how do they really make it their own and, kind of put that fusion together and make their stamp on what they believe they want this program to be? Because the stepping stone this year, it was not a little baby step. It was not one step on the staircase. I mean, they were vaulting all the way to the top of that staircase, and they're ready for the next one here with the strides they took this season. And you look at the victories they had, beating Wisconsin, beating Minnesota this season, pushing Ohio State. I don't remember the last time Ohio State has, really been pushed by a Huskies team readily throughout a couple of games this season. And I kind of wish, it kind of stinks that the first WCHA matchup of the year was against Ohio State when you don't really know what you have quite yet. I would have liked to have seen, maybe both those matchups in the second half of the season just to see what, that refined Huskies team could have done in 4 games against that Buckeyes team. But yeah, a mighty impressive season. I think that, one of the things that they're still pushing towards is, suppressing shot volume ever so slightly, but their structure has played well into allowing their goaltenders to make the saves they need to make. And then their goaltenders have made the saves maybe not expected at times. And their defensive structure has also turned into that transitional offensive game on the other side. So those two things really stand out to me, is that they're protecting the middle a lot better in the defensive side. And then they're actually able to counter that with good offensive pushback because they're not hemmed in their own zone for long stretches. This is a building block that is going to pay dividends and be felt next year and the year after because of the change in systems that we saw over the course of the season. And their record reflected it. I mean, it was impressive, mighty impressive to see, the results not only on the ice, but also the result when you look at the WCHA standings. We talked about 6th place being a fairly respectable season for this group. They were 5th. Yep. And until maybe the last month of the season, they had a chance to finish in a home spot in the WCHA. I mean, they finished their WCHA record, for those who are curious, 11, 16, and 1. 2 overtime losses in that grouping as well. 57 goals for, 82 goals against in WCHA play. Overall, they were basically 500, 18, 18, and 1. I mean, 18 victories on the season, 87 goals for, 96 goals against. Nick, remember when we were covering this hockey team, really the first 2 years that, the year that I was there and then the year of the COVID year, they had 6, maybe 7 combined wins over those 2 seasons. Maybe it was a little bit more than that. I mean, they had 18 wins.
Yeah.
This season. I mean, just incredibly impressive. And I think the thing that stands out is how excited we are for next year, is that we're, whatever we are, 5-6 months away from, training camp and getting ready for next season. I'm already excited about this women's team because what they're going to bring to the table, because it's going to be good. Regardless of who they bring back, it's going to be good because these players continue to refine themselves and continue to get better and better. And we look at some of these players. I think of players too, like your Allie Cornelius's, your Courtney Halls, who maybe when they came in their freshman year, their sophomore year, whatever it was, they maybe hadn't quite, grown into that role that they wanted to be in when they were juniors and seniors. And now you've seen them kind of blossom into those players and really flourish under the new system that the head coach and assistant coach or associate coaches have put together for them. That's what I'm most excited about, is seeing this next wave now continue to take that jump from their freshman year to their sophomore year, from sophomore to their upperclassmen years as well too. So it's going to be really exciting. Is there anything else you wanted to add about this team?
Yeah, I think the curious thing here is what happens in the transfer portal. And I say that, not just because I want to see it, but you're kind of curious to see who maybe lucks to enter the transfer portal, if there is a few. I would hope that Idalski again will utilize the transfer portal to bring some talent in. He did that actually with great success. Like, JoJo Chobak was part of that transfer portal. Just to name a few: Bailey Burton, Avery Myers, just to name a couple of folks that he brought in. So I think it goes without saying, when you have a shock to the system, now granted it was successful, right? You kind of wonder if there were some folks that kind of fell out of favor towards the end of the season. They enter the transfer portal and see, maybe looking for greener pastures per se. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. I know that St. Cloud, although, this is a much better bargaining chip now for the recruitment process, although the only catch it is it's one season, right? And so you kind of hope that, you can continue to ride that momentum. It's always, almost that second year of a new regime, which is more important than your first, because you almost kind of expect some kind of improvement. And then the question everybody else is, can you sustain it, right? I do think that they can sustain it. And again, when you have the most competitive and certainly the most talent in the WCHA, you have to sustain it to stay competitive. So this will be quite an interesting offseason to keep an eye on. I have confidence in this group. I have confidence in Idalski grabbing the right players. And more importantly, again, we know that the systems are there and the execution is getting better. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But if there's anything else, again, I'm with you. The excitement for next year has been probably at its highest in quite some time with the staff and this player group. So again, congrats to everybody for this year. It was a hell of a turnaround. You don't see that very often. And the way that they were able to do it, granted, ending on a sour note, as it seems right now, again, not official. No, that does seem like they're sort of out of the picture, but we'll see. But hell of a season.
Yeah, top 13 team in the country according to the Pairwise. You'll take that kind of effort any year, as a starting point as well too. So a great building block and a great example for this women's program as they continue to try to build that legacy in the WCHA, which is hands down, the toughest conference, obviously, in women's college hockey. So moving over to the Minnesota Wild here, our last topic in the main portion of the show. The Minnesota Wild, 32-21-6. They've got 70 points on the season. They're currently third in the Central, although Colorado is 1 point behind, and they've got three games in hand. So keep an eye on that one, obviously. But a great week for Minnesota, all things considered, all but 1 point that they missed this past week. Nashville 4-3 victory on Sunday. LA Kings 2-1 victory on Tuesday. Columbus 2-0 victory on Thursday, and a 2-1 overtime loss on Friday. So hang
on, this is incorrect, Noah, because Colorado did win. I'm showing that they're in second, and Wild are now tied for the second wild card with 70 points.
Yeah, maybe it didn't update. Yeah, they were playing late last night, so that might be why.
And the Avalanche have won 5 straight, so holy cow, they're on a roll. So tonight's game against the Blue Jackets, pretty important for this Wild squad. They can get up to 72, which would vault them back into second spot. Although, as you mentioned, now that Colorado now technically right now sitting at a 2-game in hand advantage, it would be, I think, 3. I'm not sure if Colorado does play tonight.
It should be 2 now, because they, like I said, I did the notes at about 10 o'clock after the Toro game. So the Colorado game was just starting, I believe, when that was going on. So, yeah, but they have, the Wild have Columbus on today on Sunday. They have the New York Islanders at home on Tuesday, and then they head on the road, another Western road swing up in Canada. Vancouver on Thursday, Calgary on Saturday, and then I believe they'll have Calgary again the following Tuesday back at home. So
that's right. Yeah.
So they'll flip back around here. They're 5-3-2, and their last 10 are the Minnesota Wild. So, but the bigger question here for this team, who has been rolling, Ryan Hartman has started to heat up a little bit again after kind of a weird season that he's had. The bigger piece is that Bill Guerin has said that he anticipates the Wild to be very active ahead of the trade deadline. What does that mean?
Ooh, define active, right? Now, active can mean in conversation. It doesn't mean active in terms of making moves, right? The Wild in a precarious position, as we know. I know there's been rumors of Brock Besser. Now, I think those are overhyped by quite a bit. Number one is that you got decisions to make. Brock Besser has got term left on his deal. Again, Minnesota Wild start the worst of the cap hell for Parise and Suter with, again, 14.7, I think, million in dead cap for the next two seasons starting this upcoming year in 23-24. And you've got restricted free agents that you got to re-sign or think about. One of them is Philip Gustafsson. Let's repeat ourselves. We told you so. Wild fans, we told you so. He's been actually not one of the better goaltenders for the Wild. He's actually been one of the better goaltenders around the NHL. He's been that good, and he's an RFA with arbitration rights. So it's one of those deals where I think he's kind of put himself in a priority situation. So that does hamper the Wild and what they can do. Now, does that mean Matt Dumba could be on his way out now? I don't know. I think you need him now with Jonas Brodin out, potentially with a lower body injury. The other big question is, what about Kalen Addison? He's kind of fallen out of favor, right? Because of there's no question he provides an offensive spark, but his defense has been, shall we say, less than stellar in his own end. He's a -18 on the season, which again is the most useless stat in the world, but it's a very surface indication of how things are going. In your own end, right, Noah? So it's interesting. I know Jordan Greenway is being shopped. We know that. But the question is, for a guy that's 6'6", he plays like he's 5'6" sometimes. When I watch him play, when he plays like he's 6'6", he's a very big force. But I just feel like sometimes he doesn't play with the frame that he has. It's just a very interesting dynamic with him. You talked about Ryan Hartman. I think getting back with Zuccarello and Kaprizov has really helped and resurge in his offense. They need that. Matt Boldy, again, continues to give himself opportunities. He just can't get the finish. I would love to see him add a forward if they can, but again, cap constraints are going to make it a problem. I don't see Besser coming to the Minnesota Wild. Again, that conversation is really being sort of put forward by his agent, Ben Hankinson, again, is local here. Also a big organizer to the Beauty League. Essentially, it's mostly all of his clients that come and put that showcase on. So a little bit of context for those conversations for those who are listening to them. That's all kind of been driven by the agent. Now, again, if Guerin had this space, I think it would happen. But they just don't. They just don't, unless there's cap moving. I just don't see it happening. And the Wild are not in a position to retain salary past this year. I know people are going to ask, well, Nick, they're retaining salary, but those are done after this year. Those are a very short-term type thing. So it's going to be tough. I know they say active, but active could just mean a lot of conversation. I don't think there's going to be a lot of more moving parts. And if it is, let's just put it this way, there'll be a lot of changes if it happens.
Yeah.
Or really quiet or really active.
Yeah, or they're going to have to move some key pieces, like you said, to keep them after this year, or they're going to be rentals that have, cap that is mostly completed throughout their contract, and they're going to be, rentals for a playoff push as well, too. So we'll have to see. I mean, yeah, I'm not really sure what the answer is. Obviously, we're going to have a lot more clarity after this week as to what this Minnesota Wild final plan, so to speak, the Minnesota Wild Death Star is going to look like, right? So, but one thing is for sure, like you mentioned, Gustafsson. Here's the thing. Maybe this is a better question that is way too early, because Gustafsson makes me think about this, and I'm going to pull up Cat Friendly because Lord knows that I'll definitely say something wrong. If you're the Minnesota Wild and you've got these pending UFAs and RFAs and you're Bill Guerin thinking about that at the trade deadline, who is priority for you to re-sign, and who are you trying to, not advocate as a trade piece because you feel that they're that valuable to this group?
number one, Philip Gustafson. There's no question about it. With all the UFAs and RFAs right now, because you have Fleury again signed for one more year, and I think again they talked about wanting Jesper Wallstad, their prize goaltender, to get seasoned in the AHL. They don't want to rush his development. I think that's super important. So Gustafson, I'm not sure if they were expecting this type of performance from him, right? I think they really thought Marc-Andre Fleury would take sort of, the mantle, and that hasn't been the case. It's been the opposite. Yeah. But what it does is if you can get Gustafson on a decent bridge contract, right, that puts you in a really, really good spot to try to shore up the goaltending position, at least for next year, and allow Wallstead to do what he's doing down in the American Hockey League. I think that's priority. Yeah. Then you also have, and this is and I'm going to go to a UFA, Freddie Gaudreau. Yeah. To me, he's so valuable at both ends of the ice. He's money in the shootout. He's getting paid $1.2 million right now. He's an unrestricted free agent. You've got to figure out a way to get him back. To me, those are the two priority pieces, just because of what Gaudreau can do defensively. He's just such a smart player. I really like him. I don't see reason.
Kalen Addison's got to be.
I'm split on Kalen Addison. I am. I'm split. Not from my perspective. Okay, let me make this clear. I'm splitting Kalen Addison because what I see is not the same that the team is seeing, right? We all see the potential. We all see that he's young, and I'm curious as to what their plan is, right? Because again, there is the offensive ability there. Not great defensively right now, but again, he's 21 years old, maybe 22. So he's young. Yeah. And does he get a spark, say, when Brock Faber comes back, right? Or gets into the lineup if he does elect to sign his pro deal after the Gopher season is done?
Who's your power play quarterback without him? Like, I mean, he's been lights out on special teams.
That's the thing. But you can't also be just a specialty player. That's the problem. In today's NHL, that's not going to keep you a roster spot. I think that's been part of the message that's been sent to Kalen Addison is, yes, we love you in the power play. In fact, power play has saved the Wild's, pardon my French, their ass a lot of the times in these close games, just because they don't have the scoring ability 5-on-5 this year. They just don't. Yeah. So it's a tough sell. I don't know. You kind of wonder if maybe does he need a different type of defensive partner? Is it the partner that's been holding him up? I don't know. John Merrill hasn't been great either, although he's been serviceable. So it's an interesting deadline. We'll put it to you that way. Ryan Reeves, I don't see him back. Sam Steele, I could see him being dealt just because he's kind of been fallen out of favor. And again, eight and a quarter, 800,000, 825. Jesus Christ. Let me say that 3 times fast. It's cap that people can easily attain. And I think that he is still young enough at 25, or I think a team could find value in him. Brandon Duhaime has looked really, really good, getting some elevated line time. So I think he's another guy that you have to look for a bridge deal here too. And Mason Shaw has been also very solid in his role. Penalty killing role has been really, really good. So again, we could talk about, I want Brock Besser. It's a lot more tough than that, because you got guys that are on this roster right now that you like, that are key in certain roles, and they do a lot of things for you that are going to have to get re-signed, and it's going to be tough for Bill Guerin to add and have term beyond this year. And again, do you really want the Wild right now, Noah, to go onto a rental push when they are the second wild card team and with their 5-5 scoring woes? To me, it's not the time to do that kind of move. It just isn't. So I think as much as he says he's going to be active, to me, that's a face. I think you and I both know he knows he's in a much more difficult position than he really wants to. And more importantly, if he needs to go after a big fish in the offseason, like a centerman to try to pair with Matt Boldy, I think that takes more priority than a trade deadline move. I really do think you almost have to ride this out a little bit and kind of go from there. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I was just wondering if you wanted to talk about the last UFA again for the 27,000th time.
Go for it.
No, I don't. Matt Dumba is who we're talking about. I
don't think he moves. I don't think.
No, I don't either.
I think you need him right now. That's the thing is, I know that they've called, and again, there's calls on Jordan Greenway too. But again, I just, you almost, I could see Greenway being moved just because of, he just hasn't really been the player that we need him to be. And for Dumba without Jonas Brodin, he's serviceable. Is he worth the $6 million? No, we've had that conversation for many, many years, right? When he signed it, he was blossoming into the defenseman we thought he would be. And then again, of course, post the Matthew Tkachuk fight, he's just not been the same. But I do think you just ride him out and then see if there is something available for a trade afterwards. And I think a lot of NHL GMs are going to wait till then too, because again, what's the number one thing that every GM wants to know is what's going to be the cap availability for next year. That doesn't get released until the off season. So, and right now that's in jeopardy again with the Valley Sports and the issues that are surrounding there. I do think that plays no part in the NHL. And if the even cap moves at all, because again, that's a lot of where the revenue comes from as the broadcast rights. So it's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah. I wonder, a lot of people, like I've seen people online where they're like, Matt Dumba is the worst Wild defenseman in history.
He's not.
Like he's played like 600 games in a Wild sweater. Like he's a very serviceable defenseman. Like I said, is he worth what he's being paid? Probably not. But, he's still a key piece of this lineup, like you mentioned, as of right now.
So they would take Dmitry Kulikov over Matt Dumba?
Yeah. Brendan Manel. The one person that I'm actually curious about, maybe not so much at this trade deadline, but comparative to see what he does next year, that might actually maybe be more of a conversation than maybe we want to think about. Marcus Foligno.
Yeah.
He's had kind of the injury bug. He's getting older. His year has not, been the most thrilling. And he's $3.5 million per year or something like that.
Here's the thing with Marcus Foligno, and we can say a lot about some of this from last year too, is that how many players last year had careers. It was sort of like this special season.
Yeah.
Right. And to expect that to be repeated, I think was a bit, shall I say, a bit incorrect.
Overreaching.
Yeah, overreaching. But what Marcus Foligno does, he's a guy that he plays physical. He's a guy that goes into the forecheck, and he's actually a very smart hockey player. I think he is worth a 3.5. And if you can find a way, that's the thing, is he's going to be a free agent on the second year of the larger cap hits, depending on what happens now. And this is the formula that a lot of the armchair GMs that are out there in social media forget, is your moves right now could affect your ability to retain players like a Freddie Gaudreau, like a Marcus Foligno, right? That's what, because you're not just playing for right now. It's, you have to think about, what is my cap constraints 2, 3, maybe 4 years down the road. Now, granted, in 3 years, we're going to be out of cap hell for the most part. It's going to be $833,000, I think, for 3 years after that, which is minuscule. But the thing is too, is that, you're trying to make a push. You're trying to do that. And again, what about Marco Rossi? What about Sammy Walker? What about some of these guys that are in the minors that you've been sort of hoping would blossom into the NHL players that you expect them to be? Again, we can put Brock Faber in that conversation. So there's some good news there, is that you do have some young talent that could be on cheaper contracts that you may need to rely on, that could bring that immediate value. But I don't know. Again, it's a tough puzzle. It's not as linear as people think it is. There's a lot of other steps and a lot of ripple effects to every move that you do. So,
well, sounds like the NCAA men's hockey tournament selection committee. A lot of ripple effects, a lot of things that we've got to figure out. We're going to head on over to our extra ice session and talk about exactly that. And welcome into the extra ice session here on the Huskies Warming House podcast, episode 151. Nick Maxon, Noah Grant here to bring it all to you here. Of course, the NCAA tournament for men's hockey, a mere month away, I would say. And as we look, Fargo, Bridgeport, Allentown, Manchester, we've got 3 out of the 4 regionals not in the western side of the country.
Shock.
So
it always is.
Yeah, and the one that's in the western side of the country is in America's wasteland. Okay. Well,
at least as long as the ice chillers are actually working better this time.
The ice is way better. But my buddy is the head ice guy at Shields. He got there 2 years after that regional that St. Cloud was at, and they've made some serious revamps to that ice sheet. So I would imagine the ice surface is not going to be, maybe they were partnering with St. Cloud. Maybe they also put a bid out there on Construction Journal. But oh boy. But with that being said, before we do our little selection committee, that's going to be way off base and totally incorrect because we're going to have crazy conference tournaments and then the selection committee is going to be wild. Why are there 3 tournaments out east? Should it be mandatory that there's 2 on each side of the country?
No.
Okay.
No. Because if you actually do the geographics, the percentage of teams out east far outweighs the west, even though the teams out west seem to be the ones that are always in the tournament. So it just happens to be that way. Now, that might change if you get San Diego State,
UCLA,
Oregon, all those guys, and they form their own conference, which I think they're looking to do that.
Yeah. So is it a better question to say, should there be one out west-ish? So I guess North Dakota onward, or maybe Minnesota onward, I guess.
Yep.
And should there be one kind of in the middle of the country, like Ohio, Michigan, somewhere in that, like, you know what I mean? Not.
Yeah, but here's the other problem too. And again, we talk about broadcasting.
Yeah.
Where is ESPNU based?
Yeah.
There you go. They're within a very short drive of those 3 spots. And that's the other thing too, is, college hockey to me, and this is a separate conversation too, we can spend an hour on with, is the NCAA tournament is flawed. It's completely flawed in a sense of just when you turn on the NCAA, the March Madness, the basketball, right? Every single arena is filled to the brim. Now, granted, there's a lot more teams involved to me. And I think we're at that conversation where the NCAA tournament is going to be in need of expansion, past 16 teams, to me, at least to 24. But again, separate conversation. But as of right now, they don't fill the buildings. And this is where the NCAA tournament makes their money. It's the same thing in the NCAA. It's a gate-driven revenue type stream. And they really need to figure that out first. But beyond that, this is where we're at with college hockey. You're going to have 3 hosts out east. They're going to be played in front of probably 1,000 people, and that's about it, which is terrible. And there's just not a lot of thought into the setup. But beyond that, here we are.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, was it 2 years ago or whatever it was when the Huskies were in Allentown? That rink was like weird caroms, weird bounces. Where were they the year that they went to the tournament?
They were in,
oh boy,
was it Bridgeport?
I thought they were in Allentown 2 years ago. Maybe they were in Bridgeport.
It wasn't in Allentown.
Anyway, maybe we could. Well,
I'm going to figure that out because I have this pulled up here. So let me just do some quick.
I was going to say that rink had some weird caroms and weird bounces, and of course the goalpost thing with the Spencer Knight isms and.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Just give me a quick second here because I will be on this here very, very shortly.
It was, I mean, obviously the Huskies got the job done, but just like weird caroms off the kick plate too. And it was just like, some of the things that you think about too, where it's like these buildings have to be, feel like, and of course the Huskies with the weird bounce that they had in that game where the puck ended up in the, way in the air. And then the nice little flip that Micah Miller, put home from Nolan Walker as well too in that regional. So did you figure it out?
I am coming into it right now. Okay. So the Huskies came out of, what the hell?
Wow. That sounds like quite a place to play hockey. Sounds a little bit warm, but.
So I found the bracket, but they don't tell me where.
Wikipedia should have it.
Here we go. Oh, I got it. They were in Albany.
Albany. That's what it was. Yeah,
Albany,
Albany, Allentown, out east, same thing.
So it was Bridgeport, Loveland, Albany, and Fargo were the regionals.
That's right. Yeah, Loveland. So like I like that because it's like Loveland, is in.
Yeah, and let's do this. So because I actually had this up here too. So how about this? Future sites, right? I think this is the big thing going into these types of tournaments is those. Just as much as the championship, the Frozen Four sites are, made it advanced. The regionals are also, that gets kind of interesting because with Fargo's, shall we say, lack of a good ice sheet, that kind of hurt them. Yeah. So, and here's why. So for the 2024, it's, is it Maryland Heights, Missouri?
Yep.
Rhode Island, So the Sanford Center Sioux Falls, so getting a regional in their first year with Augustana,
nice. Yeah,
and then Springfield, Massachusetts. So 2 out west, 2 out east.
yeah,
Right?
I like that.
With the Frozen Four here in St. Paul at the Xcel Energy Center, 2025, Allentown, Fargo, Manchester, and Toledo.
Yeah, see, there you have one in the middle of the country. Yeah,
Right. And then Frozen Four at St. Louis. So this is where it gets fun. 2026, Albany, Loveland, Sanford, and Worcester, Massachusetts, with the Frozen Four at, and I'm definitely going to this one, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. That there, and here's why I'm so excited for this. There's been to a couple of Golden Knights games. They're just the way that they put on the games there. I cannot wait to see what they do to beef up the NCAA tournament. This may be one of the better attended NCAA tournaments in recent history, if not in a while.
and not even just because of the teams. People in Vegas might just go to watch hockey. Like,
Vegas has an underrated fan base. Talking with a lot of the folks there over the last couple of Aprils, going to the broadcast conventions there and going to a couple of Golden Knights games at the same time. They love that team. It's their own team. In fact, a lot of them resent the Raiders because they're like, we're just sloppy seconds. No, they are invested in that team. There's a great season ticket holder base. Again, the organization has really invested money in that community. There's more rinks being built. There's a great partnership with UNLV, which is why there's a lot of talk about them turning Division I from their club team. So it's a growing sport in a spot that has historically had some hockey history there, again, before the Golden Knights, but it's really taken off. And it's fantastic, honestly. They love that team down there, and I cannot wait for them to put on, in a Vegas way, the show there for the NCAA Frozen Four. It's going to be fantastic.
you could say a good one is in the cards. Wow. Anyway, speaking of our cards,
Not your best work.
Yeah. Well, this might not be either. This is what we have written down for some of our, and yes, I have it on paper. This is how old school we've gone
on my
here.
Whiteboard. So
yeah, we are
on a hockey whiteboard. How about that? A coach's board. So
we are buzzing. We might need it after this one. So we're going to start the way that we're going to do this. We're going to pick our 1 seeds first and the regional that they're going to be associated with, and then we'll kind of go from there. Because we'll see what we can do here. So number 1, the number one seed, I am going with the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I'm going to assume you concur.
Yep.
I'm putting them in Fargo.
Same.
Okay. Number 2 seed overall, which is the second number 1 seed in the country, I'm still sticking with Quinnipiac. I'm going to say they're in Bridgeport. They're going to be in Connecticut. Number 3 seed is going to be the Denver Pioneers. I don't see them moving with the results this weekend and the NCHC tournament. I think they end up in Allentown is where I have them.
I have Michigan at number 3 overall. They're in Allentown, as they were last year as the number 1 seed. And then I have, before you get to your 4, because obviously they're flipped, me, Denver, they're going to Manchester.
Yeah, I have Michigan and Manchester. So, beyond this, do we want to do the 2 seeds or do we want to do just the regionals and go through the regionals?
Let's just go through the regionals. I think that'd be just a better visual for folks we're listening to.
Yeah, I agree. As much as I wanted to put Alaska here, I do have the Atlantic Hockey auto bid in Fargo. And I think it's going to be RIT. I think that they're going to win their tournament. I think they're just too good. Minnesota gets RIT. And the winner of that game will have the winner between St. Cloud at 2 and Michigan Tech at 3.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So I have also RIT in as the auto bid at 16 against the Gophers. And then it's St. Cloud at 2 against Alaska at number 3. Yes, I do. I did that.
Yeah. So I was really tempted to go there. I moved Alaska to a 4 seed because I wonder how some of these things are going to shake up, specifically Notre Dame, for example, looking at what they're going to be doing in terms of their conference matchup as well, too, if they can get a favorable balance. I think Alaska is just going to sneak into the tournament. I agree with you, but I think they're going to be around 13 or 14 is where they're going to be at. I think they're going to slip to a 4 seed is where I think they're going to end up. So that's the only reason. Otherwise, I would have loved to seen them in the Fargo regional. I think that would be awesome to have that type of matchup. But the Canucks, like we mentioned, they've only made the tournament one time back in 2009-10, and they lost in the first matchup against BC. So would love to see them back in the tournament as an independent. That would be
I don't
awesome.
think Alaska slips as much because, again, St. Cloud, just because of their second half, and granted they haven't lost, but they haven't really moved much. Alaska's got Lindenwood this weekend.
Yeah, Notre Dame is 14 right now, and Notre Dame right now, and let me pull it up so I don't say this wrong because Lord knows I will. Notre Dame, of course, is the 4 seed. They've got Michigan State at 5. So I think if they do any sort of damage in their conference tournament where they get past their first matchup and push into that next matchup, I think they maybe make the case. Don't forget, Cornell is at 13 right now. If they do anything in the ECAC tournament, Mankato's at 15.
Yep.
So Mankato could also be a team that slips in there as well too. I think Alaska has the potential to maybe be the first number 4 seed, but yeah.
This is why we're wrong. So, all right.
Yeah.
Next regional. So I'll go to Bridgeport.
Okay.
So Quinnipiac number 1. I've got Minnesota State as the 4th seed, Boston University the 2, with Ohio State the 3rd. So yeah, I'm essentially doing this the most lazy way possible, looking at the pairwise and essentially right now just kind of saying it's going to not move very much, which is the wrong way to do it, but that's how we go up. So it'd be Quinny versus the Mavericks, BU versus Ohio State. And again, trying to keep away the conferences too is the tricky part here too, right? So that's how I see it. I know yours is going to be slightly different.
Yeah, I tried to balance that out too, where you didn't have 2 teams from the same conference, because it seems like we have so much parity that we kind of have the ability to do that depending on how things shake out this year. I have Quinnipiac obviously as the 1 seed in this one. I put a question mark for the 4 seed because honestly, this one could be anybody. It could be an auto bid from ECAC. It could be, Cornell, for example. It could be Omaha, depending on how they do. Wild to think Omaha is second in the NCHC, but they're 16 right now. So it could be Omaha as an NCHC club. I actually have a flip-flop here. I have Ohio State as the 2 seed. Okay. And I have Western Michigan as the 3 seed. The reason I say that is because Ohio State has Penn State right now in the Big Ten tourney. And Penn State is right ahead of them at 8 right now in the pairwise. So if Ohio State can beat Penn State, those 2 teams likely will flip-flop in the pairwise standings because they're going to get a matchup against each other. So that's where I see those 2 seeding switching, but I still think they get each other in the first round, meaning Ohio State and Western Michigan. They're just flipped in seeding. So I agree with you for most of the teams. The 4 seed for this one is kind of anybody's guess. Really, it could be an auto bid here. So this is the only one that I literally have a question mark on my sheet because I'm like, this could really be anybody. So
well, since you're picking and quick question marks, geez, you lazy ass. Anyway, in Allentown, right? I had Michigan as the number 1 seed. This is where I have Cornell at the 4 seed. And then Harvard as the number 2, Western Michigan at 3. Yeah, that'd be quite a curious matchup there.
Yeah, I've only got one of those teams that's in this regional that you mentioned. So I have Denver as the 1 seed. I have Mankato as the 4 seed. The Mavs potentially winning their conference tournament, but maybe not climbing beyond that 4 spot, which is wild to think about. Harvard as the 2 seed, they get Penn State instead of Western Michigan as the 3 seed in Allentown. So,
and then Manchester, just to finish this off, Denver is the 1. I have Notre Dame as the 4, Penn State at 2, and I believe Michigan Tech I have at 3.
Yeah. Thank you.
This is Manchester, by the way.
No, I know. I'm just wondering where you put this other team that I have here. Well, I have Michigan at 1, obviously. Alaska at 4. So Alaska will get Michigan here. Notre Dame will be the 3 seed. They will get BU as the 2 seed. Where did you put BU?
BU I put in Bridgeport.
Oh, you did? Okay. I was going to say, I was like, please tell me you didn't forget the 6th overall team in the country. No, I did not. Okay, cool. So yeah, I don't know which one of us is accurate or not. Probably neither of us.
Neither of us. I mean, because again, like you said, the one thing that's cool about this year is that there's a lot of room there. At least beyond the 2 seeds, essentially, 9 on down, there could be a lot of movement in this tournament, depending on how.
And there could be a lot of movement, even I would say, even in the 2 seeds, but I would say halfway through there, maybe 7 through 16. I think we could see a lot of shuffling of the pack here. St. Cloud, a very outside chance to be a 1 seed. You'd have to have Colorado College maybe sweep Denver and Michigan lose to Michigan State this weekend, I would think. Or Michigan State. That doesn't sound right. Maybe it does sound right. No. Sorry, Wisconsin. If they lose a game to Wisconsin, maybe things could get a little bit interesting.
Right.
But with that being said, here's my question. Minnesota, Quinnipiac, Denver, Michigan. We both had those as our 1 seeds in some capacity, right?
Yep.
How many of those 1 seeds make it out of their regional?
Oof.
And who are they?
I think Minnesota, I think no question Minnesota makes it out of it. I think Denver makes it out of theirs. Quinnipiac and Michigan to me are the suspects.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Notre Dame swept Michigan. So there's some room there. In Quinnipiac, they're good, but again, I question their just the competition they've had. And again, with mine, they would have Minnesota State as their first round matchup. That's a tough match. I mean, Minnesota State has disrupted. They've been one of the hotter teams in the second half, besides kind of a goofy end of their season. Again, that for whatever reason, the Mavs can't win at home ice this year. It's just been weird. Then BU and Ohio State. Again, Ohio State also a very good club. So to me, those are suspect. Western Michigan in the Michigan bracket for mine. Harvard, Cornell is Cornell. So it's again, but then again, who would have thought back in 2018, 2019 that St. Cloud would have lost AIC? So
yeah. Or that St. Cloud,
know, right?
St. Cloud a couple of years ago would have punched their ticket to, a Frozen Four as well too.
Exactly, when they had to go against BU and BC, right?
Yeah. For me, to be honest with you, I honestly think Minnesota is the only team that I feel comfortable saying that they're going to win their tournament or their regional.
And even
maybe Denver. That Fargo regional too. Honestly, Minnesota, St. Cloud, Tech, and RIT for example, is what I put there. That's not exactly an advantageous regional.
No,
if you're the Gophers, right. I mean, let's not forget the last time Michigan Tech was in that Fargo building, their season ended in very heartbreaking fashion. I think it was a senior defenseman who lost an edge at the blue line and ended up being the OT game winner in that one. So,
but mind you, St. Cloud in 2020 was the 3 seed in their bracket too. So they beat BU and then had to beat Boston College again in that regional final.
Yeah.
So just to kind of give everybody a little bit of an idea of where it doesn't matter again.
It really doesn't.
It really doesn't. You just need to punch your ticket in, and granted, the home ice feel maybe just the only advantage really is you get last change, but at the end of it, I think St. Cloud, just because of maybe some personnel, could utilize that and really need it if they can get it. So being a 2 seed does help, especially in your first round. You obviously, depending on, in my region, you'd have to face the Gophers if you're able to take care of business against Alaska, which St. Cloud has beaten the Gophers, right? So it's like it's a one-off, right?
Yeah, and how
everything's up in the air.
And how much do you not want to play a team like Alaska, by the way, who's given Denver fits this season?
Yes.
I really, if there's anything that happens, I really hope they make the tournament. That's basically what it comes down to. They've got Lindenwood this weekend, so they got to take care of business here. But Huskies Warming House podcast, big Nanooks fans right now, I would say. I think it'd be awesome to see them as an independent be in the tournament. Wherever they are, I just want them to make the big dance. I think that would be awesome.
I think it'd be tough right now. Again, the 20 wins, 10 losses for Fairbanks. The Nooks coming into this final weekend. You take care of business against Lindenwood. I don't know how you hold them out of the tournament right now. I really don't. Whether it's a 3 seed, a 4 seed, again.
Auto bids is the only thing. It's like if you're sitting at 14 and you get the CCHA who gets if Bowling Green wins the CCHA and you get the ECAC who gets a weird winner that's not Harvard or Quinnipiac, then things get interesting. Obviously got to take care of business against Lindenwood like you mentioned, but Fairbanks was 17 last weekend in the pairwise and they moved up to 12. So there's still a lot of volatility essentially in the pairwise as well too. So we could be totally off base within next week, which would be par for the course in the show, I would say. But nonetheless, speaking of next week, of course, men's hockey finishing up this weekend at home for the regular season against Duluth. Women's hockey is done. We will still track the WCHA and, of course, the NCAA tournament on that side. Minnesota Wild have 4 games this week. And for our show, we will be recording on Monday night, likely a Tuesday morning release for next week as we get you primed and ready for some playoff action on the men's side. For Nick Maxon, I am Noah Grant, and we will see you soon in the den.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.